Welcome to Red Eyes Radio. My name is Henrik Palmgren, and it's a pleasure to talk to you today. We are grateful that you're interested and care about the kind of subjects that we present and address. RedEyesCreations.com is our website. In case you're a new listener, go there for much more info about our program. As always, it needs to be said, now and then we encourage you to think for yourself, to do your own research and come to your own conclusions about the material presented. We do not have an agenda, and we're not trying to convince you of anything beyond getting you to think for yourself. And if you think that we're lacking a perspective, you can always contact us through our website and leave us your topic or guest suggestions as well. Today we have author John Coleman with us on the program to primarily discuss his book The Conspirators' Hierarchy, the Committee of 300, and his thoughts on the current state of the United States. We are also going to try to dig a little bit deeper into the question of the origin of the group of 300 and how far back into history they go. John Coleman is also the author of the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, What You Should Know About the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights, Beyond the Conspiracy Unmasking the Invisible World Government, The Club in Rome, Illuminati in America, We Fight for Oil, A History of U.S. Petroleum Wars, and many others. He has been going at it for nearly 35 years, speaking around the world, and he's also been producing World in Review, a bi-monthly news magazine since 1970. His website is Coleman300.com. John Coleman, welcome to Red Eyes Radio. We really appreciate your time. It's great to have you with us here. You're kind of a legend in the field, especially considering your work on the Conspirators' Hierarchy, the Committee of 300, a very well-known book, of course, and that's probably the work that you're most known for. And I think even some of our people out there in the audience that might not have heard about your name probably have heard about that book and or at least the name Committee of 300, well, of course.
That's right. That's the Bible of all conspiracies, so to speak. And it's a book that's been around for quite some time. I've taken the best part of my adult life to put it together, and it's taken me to 14 different countries, and a lot of research, a 5-year stint at the British Museum in London, and that's an amazing repository of knowledge. Of course, people just don't go there. That's not, and it's like the Congressional Records and the Annals of Congress and the Congressional Globes, which is the written record of everything that's spoken in the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate. But as the great Senator Sam Ervin once said, nobody reads these things. So there's this huge mass of knowledge out there, but it's not being used, it's not being read, and it's just absolutely almost foreign to the American people themselves. The American Constitution, the American people they do not know their Constitution because they've been deliberately dumbed down. It's not taught in the schools, in the universities, or in the law faculties. In fact, I had a couple of law professors call me up one day and say, where did you get all this material from? We can't find any of it in the law books. Of course not. It's not in the law books. It's in the Annals of Congress, Congressional Globes and Records, and, of course, the records contained in the British Museum. So there's a tremendous effort gone into this book, and it's expanded over the years. It started out small, but it's now a 488-page book. And believe me, it's packed with knowledge from cover to cover.
Absolutely. And I know, John, that you want to address also, obviously, the current state of the United States, particularly the U.S. Constitution, the ongoing wars, and the consequent strain on the people over there, the resources, and, of course, the economy with over $3 billion spent and counting. It's probably even more by this time. But I do want to kind of sidetrack you, I guess, a little bit here in the beginning, though. And before we go into that area, and just ask you a little bit about the origins, I guess, of your work on the Committee of 300. And you mentioned, obviously, that you've been studying at the British Museum in London. If one goes to your Wikipedia page about you, it says that you're a former British intelligence officer for MI6. And maybe you can just tell us a little bit how you got onto this path of tracing the world conspiracy, John.
Well, I realized in my early days that there was something radically wrong with the whole system, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And by a process of evolvement, I gradually came down to the knowledge and the understanding that I'll never find this in history books, that I'd have to search out in other areas as well. And so I looked at the old records of the British East India Company. Now, this was a huge conglomerate. It dwarfed General Motors, and if you combine General Motors and Ford annual sales, it's nothing compared to the sales brought in by the opium, which was under the control of the British East India Company. They did all the buying in India. They went to see the Indian Maharajas, and they go on concessions, starting back in 1612. And they amassed enormous fortunes, and so they wielded tremendous power. They controlled the British government, and then eventually they allowed their American cousins, people like the Andesite Perkins and those big Eastern liberal establishment families. It says there's a saying that they speak only to themselves and not to God, and I think that sums it up pretty well. But they had all of the power, and they were running the United States, and the people were just not getting any say whatsoever in the government. And as I said, the American people did not know their constitution, and that just led us to the present situation where we engaged in 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan at the cost of $3 billion and counting. And this has put an enormous strain on our people and our resources. And yet our congressmen and senators do nothing to stop it when they have the power and the authority to order all of our troops and the equipment to return to the U.S. within 45 days. And we see on the news every day that the president is doing this and that and the other, and ordering the troops to do this, that, and the other, and seems to be very well involved in the mission of the troops. Actually, the president has no war powers whatsoever, and he cannot do anything as far as the mission of the troops or where they should go or what they should be doing. And of course, these wars are undeclared wars, which will bring me to another step. And no war can be fought without a declaration of war. And these 2 wars are being fought without a declaration of war.
Yeah.
A declaration of war is a 5-step process. In fact, when the founding fathers were talking about the Constitution, they spent the longest time and there was most heated passion over this declaration of war. And it's a 5-step process, and what it says is that war cannot be declared unless the U.S. is attacked first. And the attack must have been a substantial one. That has to be laid out on the table, and the people must be told what that comprises. Congress then states the mission of the troops and how long the war shall last. This is a fact. They have to state the beginning date and the ending date. And there cannot be any open-ended wars like going on now in Iraq and Afghanistan. So you can see from there that we as a nation are disobeying the highest law of the land by having our forces in Afghanistan, not having obtained authorization through a declaration of war or any of those steps that are so vital. And another thing, very important, all presidents since Woodrow Wilson have violated the oath of office and became directly involved in ordering the mission of the troops. And the Constitution has clearly declared, as I said before, that no president has any war-making powers. Congress, on the other hand, has the absolute authority to recall the U.S. troops, and this is what they should be doing. Our troops should be recalled from Afghanistan and from Iraq, because we are fighting an undeclared war. And there's another thing here that's important. Congress has no authority to fund undeclared wars. So you can see that I believe firmly that we've got ourselves into this terrible mess, and the United States is going downhill fast because we've done all these things which are not authorized by the bedrock document, the highest law of the land, the United States Constitution. I don't see how any nation can make any progress if they don't obey the highest law of their land. That's the question
right.
I put out to people. How do you think we can make progress? How can we get economic progress? There's a big conference going on now in South Korea about all of these things, but they are secondary. They don't matter at all unless we have our constitution up front.
Mm.
And we're arguing with the Koreans about devaluing North Korea and China particularly about devaluing their currency. But nothing of this is important because of our situation. All of these things fall into place once your bedrock constitution is being obeyed and followed.
The meeting that you're talking about, obviously, the G20 meeting, as you say, is ongoing in South Korea, and with that in mind as well, other meetings or other kinds of announcements that has been made. I remember that the U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates said on Tuesday, this is the 9th of November, that Washington, I guess he's speaking for all of the people, in the United States. He said that Washington was open to keeping troops in Iraq beyond a 2011 deadline. But it was up to Baghdad to make a request. But this is interesting, this topic as well, because obviously the deadline for the war has just been being pushed up forward all the time. And you were supposed to be out of there, 3 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now?
5 years ago. Yeah. 5 years ago. Well, Mr. Gates, with all respect to his high office and to himself as a very honorable gentleman, he does not have the knowledge of the Constitution that's required of him. Because if he had that knowledge, he wouldn't be making statements like that. The United States is in no position to become an empire. We are not an empire. We're a democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. And all our forces belong at home. You found that the fall of Rome, for instance, was very much brought about by having hundreds of thousands of troops scattered all over the world. And they couldn't do anything at those outposts with the people who are in rebellion constantly. And they expended their substance, and their economy fell into disrepair at home. And then eventually they were attacked by the Visigoths, the uncivilized people who came down from the north, and Rome was destroyed. And it's, we're finding there's so much of a parallel between Rome and the United States. We are trying to build an empire. Our government is trying to build an empire by having outposts everywhere, but that's completely unconstitutional. There's no authority for us as a nation to have outposts all around the world. It's just not there.
Do you think, John, that the United States unlawfully then is being used as this empire builder for other forces in the world?
Well, it all gets back to the Committee of 300. The United States, like every other government, is fully controlled by the Committee of 300. I don't think there's any doubt at all about that. Of course, if you tell people that, they look at you and think you've gone off the wall and probably label you as a crazy kook. But I'm backed by years and years of study, in fact 32 years altogether up to date. And the man who got me started on this was the late Senator Sam Ervin, who was probably one of the best constitutionalists who ever lived in the 20th century. And I went to see him because I said I really would like to know the U.S. Constitution. What college or university could I go to study it? And he said, don't go to any, they don't teach the Constitution in America. He said the American people are deliberately dumbed down, and there's no college and no university, no school of law